Hey, it's Dr. E with ManualTherapist.com. I'm here with Todd Hargrove of BetterMovement.com and the author of A Guide to
.org.
Better Movement, right?
Yes, and bettermovement.org.
Oh, geez, I'm sorry. BetterMovement.
That's okay. That's okay. Understandable.
Yeah, I have it
Thank you
bookmarked.
for having me.
You
I'm
know,
glad
I
to be
only,
here.
I only typed it in once, and I bookmarked it about 4 years ago. And his site was one of the sites that actually changed my mindset about stretch tolerance, what I call movement tolerance. And Sienna, it ties in very nicely with what I preach about modern pain science and central governors and other theories that we get from Butler and Mosley and guys like Pinhead.com. So I think that every once in a while you guys need to hear it from someone else, and it's just not that I'm preaching this message. But Todd, can you tell us a little bit about your background? Because it's not you're a rolfer, but you didn't start off that way, right?
Right, right. Yeah, I used to be a lawyer, and in my 20s I was a lawyer, and eventually I became a rolfer. And when I would go back to my high school reunions, they're like, "How did that happen?" And I'm like, "Well, that's just the next logical progression, right?"
Yes.
But
Happens to most of it.
But when I was growing up, I was an athlete and I was involved in sports, and some of them kind of competitive and some not so competitive. And then when I got into college, I for some reason got really interested in sports at kind of a different level. I started playing pool, and for some reason, I just got really kind of like almost obsessed with pool, and I was kind of like really interested in analyzing it and figuring out exactly the best way to do it. And there was no internet back then, and so I just kind of had to rely on getting these cheesy, VHS videos and kind of crummy books to figure out how to do it better. And after a while, I just kind of realized I was really interested in the process of just kind of analyzing movement and figuring out how to get it done. And then I started playing squash a little bit later, and kind of got very competitive and interested in that. And then I found some books by Gray Cook and Michael Boyle, which were, and those guys kind of, there was the interesting thing I found interesting about them was that they kind of, well, Cook was a physical therapist trying to improve function, and Boyle was a functional guy, and he was listening to the physical therapists. At the same time I was reading those books, and I was an attorney, I was having some chronic pain, probably related to being cooped up in my office and sitting around a lot, and I was trying really hard to work on that. And I started reading whatever I could find to learn about that, and going to physical therapists and trying yoga and stuff like that. And at some point I realized I was just kind of really interested in movement, I was interested in pain, and I was interested in how those things related together and how you could use one to treat the other. And there was one day that I was like supposed to be at a continuing legal education seminar, and supposed to be learning about something, and I just kind of went in and signed in and took a donut and left and didn't attend the thing, and was thinking, if I was actually going to these things, I'd probably be a better lawyer. And within like a day or two after that, I was on the internet poking around at, learning about my real subject of interest, which was pain and movement, and I saw that there was some sort of seminar coming to town on back pain or shoulder pain or something. I go, I wish I could attend that, but I'm not a PT. And then I thought, I should be in, maybe it would be a good idea if that was my career. So I almost went to PT school, but then I got rolfing at the same time. I really liked that. I said, I'm going to go to school to be a rolfer. That was about 10 years ago.
All right. So yeah, you kind of dated yourself, and all of a sudden the internet came onto the story real fast. So that wasn't a process that occurred over a year, I assume.
No. Yeah, I was kind of interested in this stuff for a long time, and I was always greedy for information, and it wasn't there for a while. And when the internet came along, and there was such an explosion of information. I mean, now that I've got my reading list is so long, I can't even get through it. But back then, I'd be reading the same book over and over.
Right, right. Well, that's interesting. One of my favorite posts of yours that I even think I found archived, or maybe you linked back to it a while back on your Facebook, was about how you had knee pain, and then you were at a playground, and then you realized that the more you kind of played, the better it got. Can you tell readers that story? Because I think it's a really good story.
Yeah,
You're
yeah, yeah. So I've
talking.
always had a little bit of knee pain that comes with the knees getting forward and maybe landing a jump. And I can remember feeling it as early as maybe when I was even in high school. And it's never really been that big of a thing. But like when I play squash, when I play sports, I can expect it's going to bother me a little bit on maybe the second or third day, and then I've got to tone it down a little bit. So I've, maybe probably for years after that, I would avoid landing a jump, like, at a playground, like I see kids doing all the time from like maybe 3 or 4 feet up. And then I think I'd gone to a parkour class, or I'd watched a parkour thing on how to land jumps. And so I just kind of slowed it down. So I started with just maybe being standing up, and then, trying to, get down to the ground and just like with really good form and in a really slow, non-threatening kind of a way. And then I started to speed it up a little bit, and then I kind of realized that as I was just slowly progressing this, actually only over a couple of minutes, I was able to be landing jumps from 3 and 4 feet up with comfort, and it was really easy. And my knees actually felt better after challenging them with that force that usually would irritate them a little bit. And so I was kind of asking myself, how was I able to do this? Was it motor learning? Was I able to affect my form, which is getting rid of nociception? I thought, I don't think that that's it. So what I thought was, maybe this is all just about like sending good news to the nervous system. So I mean, my idea, not my idea, but I look at pain as being caused by the perception of threat related to a particular movement. So my nervous system, in my opinion, had really associated this particular movement with threat and with pain, so that whenever it sees it, it's going to cause pain. But basically what I think that I did was I kind of like was able to break that association by doing a lot of reps really slowly, making sure there was no nociception there, and basically sending my brain a lot of good news about this movement, kind of telling it that this is something that's safe to do, that can be done without nociception. And once it got that message, it was more willing to allow me to do it. So that's kind of the story that I told myself about it. I think it's kind of a plausible story, and I think it's something that that is, I keep that in mind with my clients as well. And I think that type of process, that graded exposure process, explains a lot of the results you get from either movement or manual therapies.
Right, right. Yeah, I was just about to say that. Then you said at the end, I mean, that was your own graded exposure. You just kind of figured it out on your own.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, question for you: what do you think, or in your opinion, are either the publics or even clinicians, and in some ways it's the same. What are the three biggest misconceptions of movement?
Yeah, yeah. In some ways it's the same. In some ways it's not. I mean, everyone has different, misconceptions. But I guess one popular one would be that there's a right way to move or a wrong way to move that is true across populations of people. I hear people saying there's no right way to move and no wrong way to move, and in a way I just agree with that, but in another way I don't. I mean, there are better and worse ways to move for sure, but they are only true for a particular person. So what's right for one person is not necessarily right for another person. Just to use postures as an example, in general, you like to see kind of like a stacked vertical posture, and kind of a plumb line is an efficient way to stand. But if you have scoliosis, then standing in a straight line is basically taking each one of your vertebrae outside of neutral. So, imposing one platonic standard of movement on every person doesn't respect the individuality of their structure, of their skeletal structure. Everyone's bones are wonky and different, and some people have retroverted hips and some people have introverted hips. And I think we're starting to see a lot of new articles recently on the internet from a lot of people that kind of respect this individuality between people, and that's a cool thing. Another thing that's tough is distinguishing what Barrett Dorko calls defense from defect. So if you see somebody moving in what seems to be kind of a wonky way or suboptimal for them, you don't really know if they're defending, if that movement is like an optimal strategy to defend against what might be some unseen pathology they've got in their knee or their back or something like that. So maybe that movement strategy they're adopting is actually a good defense against that pathology, and it's not a defect in their biomechanics. So I guess that's. I guess I'll throw in this as another misconception about movement, or at least what I think is a misconception, is that because of these problems with defense and defect and individuality between different people, I guess a misconception would be that it's really easy to assess what's good movement and bad movement with simple tests that look at, objective tests that look at like a range of motion here, or did you hit that point there, or are these two things in line? I like those tests because they're objective, but I don't like them because it's hard for them to respect the complexity of biomechanics and the complexity and intelligence of different compensations for unseen defenses that are going on, and the individuality of different people. So to protect against that, I think it's a good idea to have in mind, movement assessments which are almost kind of like more subjective. And subjective is a problem because it's not measurable, but kind of like an understanding of movement which is almost like an aesthetic idea of what's good movement. Like you can, in other words, sometimes with someone you can see that they have good movement. It's hard to tell exactly why that is. There's kind of like a flow or a grace or a symmetry to it, but how do you measure it exactly? I'm not sure.
Right, right. And I like the way that you went about that in your book, talking about the ability to change direction, how agile you are, just seeing good movement when you see it, but it is hard to objectify like one dancer versus another dancer, because it's such an individual thing. Yet at the same time, I think, and I was surprised too, because you did respect kind of like a primal movement pattern, or something like, you said why the get-up might be more popular, or why you do need the building blocks. And I really like the analogy, and I highlighted it for using, in a quote during the review. It's going to appear in this blog post. But what was the analogy you used about the building blocks for movements? Like if you don't have the building blocks.
It might have been based on language. So I like the idea that movement is like a language, and we can judge movement competence kind of the way we judge language competence. We say someone's fluent in movement if they have a lot of variability in their movement. So we wouldn't judge someone's movement fluency by just saying how perfectly can you say that one sentence. We would look to them being able to communicate that idea in 100 different ways. So I think movement's kind of the same thing. But as far as like building blocks goes, the analogy to movement is that if you were speaking a language and say you had lost some really building block words, like you forgot how to say the or and, or make some basic grammatical constructions, then you would be really struggling to form tons of sentences. The way you form sentences in English or any language is to learn a very limited amount of letters and words and grammatical tools, and then you combine them in different ways to form an infinite amount of thoughts. And it's kind of the same with movement. The brain doesn't create separate neural programs for like a billion different types of movements. It knows how to do like a limited amount of basic movements, and then it combines them in different ways to form all the movements that we do. So you watch a dancer running around and doing an infinite amount of interesting things. It always breaks down into some basic stuff. And if you could train any one movement to that would have a lot of carryover to your life or help you with a lot of things, it would be one of those foundational building block types of movements. Or to use the example I use in the book, if I got better at my tennis serve, I'd be better at my tennis serve and almost nothing else. But if I got better at squatting, my tennis serve might get a little bit better because there's kind of a squat pattern there, and hundreds of other things in my life would also maybe get a little bit better. So that's the idea of a developmental, a foundational, a fundamental movement, and why I think that should be a target.
Right, right. Well, I don't want this to run too long, but I'm sure. I mean, you just get so much information from not only your blog post, but let's go back to the book, because this is why I'm interviewing you. And Guide to Better Movement, I think, as you said, it's for clinicians and public alike, and I think that it respects the knowledge of clinicians, yet it's still going to be very informational to the public. Some parts might be some parts might be a little too basic for clinicians. Some parts might be a little bit over the head of some of the public. But I think it is very healthy respect for both. And even if you've been following pain science for 12 years like I have, taking one of Butler's first courses in the U.S., you can still glean information from it. So why would you say, in general, to an audience who's probably very interested in purchasing your book, why would they need to read this?
Why would they need to? Well,
Why would
one of the reasons,
yes,
well, like you just mentioned with pain, I mean, I find myself that I think that there's something very counterintuitive about pain science, and whenever you're dealing with these kind of, there's a lot in the book that's kind of like mind-body kind of stuff, and I think we all get inherently confused when we're thinking about those types of things, and it helps to kind of look at the subject matter from different perspectives and read different people on the same subject. I mean, personally, when I read about pain, I read a lot of books on pain, and I find that I reread them and I get new things each time I read them. So I would say, even if you've read a lot about this, I think it would probably be helpful to you to get a different perspective, hear different kind of analogies or a different way of wording the same information, and you probably take away from something from that and solidify your understanding of it. But then, of course, there's a lot of people out there for whom a lot of these ideas would be new. The basic perspective in the book is that these are brain-based strategies to move better and feel better, and this is like a nervous system perspective on why manual therapy works, why exercise therapy works. So it's not about denying that the body is important or that structure is important or hardware or peripheral factors, but it's like, let's understand as well as we can what's going on in the center, what's going on with the software of the body, how does the nervous system affect movement and perception, just kind of looking at it from that perspective. And when I look at things from that perspective, when I take that perspective, I'm really impressed by how much the nervous system probably does account for changes we see when we do movement practice or we do manual therapy.
right. Right. Again, I think the book is also just very respectful of someone's either knowledge or their lack of knowledge. And basically, if the one sentence review I would give it is all the knowledge but none of the pretentiousness. So
Thank you.
Yeah, because some of the guys, pain science guys online, are just like, oh, I'm a recovering manual therapist, and I think there's just manual therapy is not for everyone. Movement initially is not for everyone, but in general, my message is always, every manual therapy is just to get the person moving better, and it's the movement and what they do at home and away from you is really what makes them better, along with the education that you give them, not necessarily what you do in the visit.
Yeah, I like the way you say that, because there's a lot of complicated science in the book, but it all boils down to a pretty simple takeaway that like you just said right there. The way people move in their everyday life is important, and that's what's going to make the difference.
Right. Well, thank you, Todd. Any closing thoughts other than buy my book? Read my blog?
Yeah, that would be cool. Thanks a lot for having me on. I guess that's my closing thought. I enjoy talking with you and lots of other people who are as knowledgeable as you, and I appreciate the chance to come on.
Right. Well, you're one of the guys who basically made me softer. So 4 years ago when I started your blog, I was like,
Cool.
I was beating people up and deforming, superhumanly strong, deforming their fascia, and once you come across certain research articles, and it's one of the things of my courses too. Basically, it's if you believe the stuff that I'm teaching now and you still continue to go out there and beat on people, then you're just being a sadist. After you're presented with the information, you decide not to make any changes. So, all right. Thanks a lot. Short review of the book, if you're not willing to, if you haven't made it this far into video, it's also on the blog. But it will be one of my top 5 recommended books to all clinicians, patients, and students, for years to come. So.
Thanks, man. That's great. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.